And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman, and this episode is entitled Cottage Talk Fulham Media Buzz. Could Fred be joining Fulham? This is a question that I will be discussing in this episode. There is speculation in regards to Fred today, and I'll be sharing my thoughts on that. Also, I'll be sharing my thoughts on Leicester City right back Timothy Castagne. There is speculation with Fulham as well with this player. To end the show, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on why I believe Fulham deserved credit. I tweeted something out yesterday. I'll be sharing that tweet once again and why I feel Fulham deserves some credit for what they have done so far during the transfer window. Okay, let's get to it. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Okay. So let's start with the news I saw this morning on Twitter. His name is Terry Flores from Give Me Sport. He tweeted earlier today, quote, Fred to Fulham is on and very active today, unquote. So that was the tweet that was earlier on Twitter. If you want to call it X, we can call it X. I also saw a picture that was on Fred's Instagram account. People are claiming that this picture was in London. That could be something as well. But what's interesting about the whole situation with Fred is I truly want this to happen. Now, will it happen is another thing. A source close to me told me that right now, as I'm recording this, a fee has not been decided between Fulham and Manchester United, but they're working on it. That's what I actually heard from a source. I believe something's going on here. I think Fulham are trying to sign Fred and trying to work out a deal with Manchester United. So here's the question. If this does happen, does this change anything for Fulham Football Club? And the answer to that is absolutely. I do buy the story. This is someone that actually has a lot of Twitter followers. I am buying the story. Like I said, I actually heard from a source. I think there's something going on today. So we'll see if anything does happen with Fred. But I really want this to happen. I think Fred would change Fulham. Now, as I tweeted out earlier, Fred's the type of player that I think Fulham should be signing. The unfortunate part is that he happens to be getting a little bit older. 30 years old is an age where you're thinking, should you be signing a player like this? But I think what he would offer on a short-term basis, maybe for a couple seasons, would be well worth it. So for me, I'm all about this. Can you imagine a midfield with Paulinho, Pereira, and then Fred? I think that would be extremely dynamic. I wanted a dynamic central midfielder. I think Fred offers that. Now, has he really lit it up at Manchester United? There have been some good moments and some moments that I don't think were what the Manchester United supporters were hoping he would be. But under Marco Silva, I believe that you would get the best out of Fred. We've seen this time and time again. Willian, Pereira, the list goes on and on. I'll even throw in Tim Ream, Jedi. So many players have improved under the coaching of Marco and his staff. I believe if you put Fred in this Fulham team, you will get the best out of him, and he will enhance Fulham Football Club. Now, like I mentioned, nothing's done yet as I am recording this on Tuesday. Nothing is done, but things could be happening. We shall see how this all works out. But the question is, would I want Fred at Fulham Football Club? Yes, I wanted Yunus Musa. He decided to go to AC Milan. I thought that should have been Fulham's plan A. But I think as a plan B, Fred is a very good plan B, in my opinion. This all goes back to what we saw with the video of Marco and Fred talking after the match. I don't think that is something that we should just be discounting. I think it's something that you should be looking at and saying, was there something to it? I think there was. I really hope Fred becomes a Fulham player. I think if you look at what Fulham have done so far and potentially could be doing, they could be building a club that I have said, I'm predicting 7th. They need a lot of pieces. Fred would be a huge piece of the puzzle. I really hope this happens. Only time will tell. Like I mentioned, a source told me that they are talking about the fee, meaning Fulham and Manchester United. So we'll see how this all plays out. That's the number one story. Number two story involves Timothy Castagne, a right back from Leicester City. Now, I saw this in the Telegraph, and I'll just read the excerpt from it. There's other stuff on him today, but in the Telegraph, it says Fulham's transfer priorities are in other positions in the final 3 weeks of the window. Silva wants Belgium international Timothy Castagne as his priority in the right back position, with Leicester only selling for the right price. Norwich's Max Aarons was looked at earlier in the summer. So it's evident that Fulham are looking for another right back. Marco wants competition at all positions. Love Kenny Tete, but I would be all for this. It probably will come down to the price. Can they come up with a price that works for both sides? So for me, I would love to see a player like this come to Fulham. What I do like is that Fulham are linked to experienced Premier League players. I mentioned before, Jamari Gray, Callum Hudson-Odoi. We're talking Premier League players. That's what they should be doing. They should be looking at that. They should also be trying to get younger. But in the case of Castagne, who I believe is 27, and of course, Fred, who's a little bit older at 30, I'm for these moves, but they do have to bring in younger players as well. Going back to Fred, if they bring in Fred, I do hope that they, in this window or the next window, look for a younger central midfielder that they can basically just get ready for the future. But these potential moves, and their potential, it's speculation, could really change Fulham Football Club. Damari Gray, Callum Hudson-Odoi. There's all speculation with these players. Nothing's been done. But if Fulham hit on some or all of these, Fulham are going to surprise many pundits in England. I will say that again. I am not changing my mind on 7th. I love the fact that they're targeting players with Premier League experience. A situation like Leicester City makes sense for Fulham. They've gone down. If they can get the price right, we'll see if Timothy Castagne comes to Fulham. Situation with Callum Hudson-Odoi, a lot of potential. And could you find a diamond in the rough? Could you find a player that has not lived up to his potential yet, but with Marco Silva lives up to his potential now? So all these situations that Fulham are deal with Premier League players for the most part, lots of potential and experience to go along with that. So for me, I like what they're doing here if I'm going by the speculation. I really do. And I'm feeling more and more confident about my prediction. Based on the speculation that I'm seeing, I think we got 2 quality players already through the door, and I think there are more to come. That's why I'm not changing my prediction of 7th. Okay. Coming up next to end this episode of Cottage Talk, I'm going to talk about why I feel Fulham deserve credit right now for the window. Okay, to end this episode of Cottage Talk, I'm going to discuss a tweet I put out yesterday. And I find this interesting because when you look at what's been going on with all the Saudi clubs, so many clubs have been selling players, basically just letting them go. Good fees, decent fees, but letting them go. Now, I'm sure that there are other clubs that have not allowed their players to go to Saudi Arabia or have basically fought back. There might be, but I think Fulham really have been the one that has really stood out here. So I'm going to read my tweet that I tweeted out earlier yesterday and share my thoughts on it. So this is what I tweeted out, and I'll discuss it. So if I told you that the club in the Premier League rejected offers for their main striker, kept their number one winger, and held on to the coach while dealing with severe interest from Saudi Arabia, would you have guessed it would be Fulham? the club deserves credit. The club deserves massive credit for this. They have not buckled to the pressure of selling Mitro. Now, that can change, obviously. Every player has a price. That could change. Willian stayed with Fulham. Marco Silva stayed with Fulham. All with this incredible Saudi Arabian interest on those three men. And they're still Fulham players and a manager. How many clubs can say that? So that's credit to everyone at Fulham Football Club. Listen, you can have your issues with ownership. I have said I don't like the way that they do business all the time. But the one thing that I can say is up to this point, they have backed themselves and they have not buckled to the pressure that they're probably have been under. They've been under a lot of pressure to sell Mitro. They really have been. And they have not to this point. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you about Mitro? What does that tell you about Willian? What this tells me right now is that Fulham have stayed true to themselves and ownership has backed themselves not to give in. And I think that is tremendous. They deserve credit for that. It can all change by the end of the window, and then I'm going to look like an idiot. Wouldn't be the first time. But to this point, Fulham deserves so much credit for holding on to their main striker, their top winger, and their head coach who makes it all go. All three men are with Fulham right now. We should be happy about that, and the Cons deserve some credit. I know it's hard for some to give them credit, but they deserve credit for this. Okay, they absolutely deserve credit for this. You can disagree with me, but this is how I feel about it, that throughout this window, Fulham have been targeted by these Saudi Arabian clubs, and we're talking three main people at Fulham Football Club are still at Fulham Football Club. That deserves credit. That's just the way I am. That deserves credit to me. People might disagree, but that's just how I feel on that. And like I said, I will always call it like I see it. I beat to my own drum. I just do. If I feel someone deserves credit, I'm going to give it. If I feel that someone deserves criticism, I'm certainly going to give it. I've not agreed with everything that the Cons have done. I don't think at times that they're aggressive enough getting players. I will say it again. Sometimes you've got to pay a little bit more to get the player that you want. It's not all about the business deal. Sometimes the player is more important than getting the right deal. That's how I feel. So I disagree with some of the moves that they made business-wise, but the argument could be, well, they got the players in. So they look like the heroes, but I don't have to love their business model. But I feel strongly that I should be giving them credit where it's deserved. So far in this transfer window, three key men are still with Fulham Football Club. Shahid, Tony Khan, Alistair McIntosh, everyone involved at Fulham Football Club deserve credit. And I'll just leave it at that. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. I do want to mention that we will be having several shows coming up in the very near future. I will be having a preview or previews of the upcoming match against Everton. I will be talking to a friend of mine who is an Everton supporter on Wednesday, and I'll be sharing that shortly afterwards. That should be fun to get some insight on Everton coming into this match against Fulham at Goodison Park. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. My name is Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.